Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to cover the topic the Great Depression, how the economy collapsed during 1929 until 1933. And this economic collapse, what is called as the Great Depression, was one of the reasons that was the contributing factors for the rise of the conflicts in late 1930s, what we know it as World War II. And this Great Depression that we are discussing about was after the World War One. So I wish to begin it now. By the late 1920s, the world appeared to be recovering from the devastation of First World War. Industries were rebuilding, international trade had resumed, and new financial arrangements were in place to stabilize economies. For many, it seemed as though the worst had passed, but this stability was fragile. Much of the global system rested on credit speculation and uneven economic recovery. At the center of this system was the United States. American banks were lending heavily to Europe, particularly to Germany, which depended on these loans to sustain its economy and meet the obligations imposed after the war. At the same time, within the United States, economic growth was increasingly driven by financial markets. Millions of people began investing in stocks, often borrowing money to do so, believing that the prices would continue to rise indefinitely. This created a dangerous imbalance. Stock prices rose far beyond the actual value of the companies. The market was no longer driven by economic fundamentals, but by optimism and speculation. As long as confidence remained high, the system continued to function. But once the confidence weakened, the entire structure became vulnerable. In October 1929, the vulnerability turned into collapse. A wave of panic selling swept through the stock market. Prices fell rapidly, wiping out billions of dollars in value within a matter of days. Investors who had borrowed money could not repay their debts, and banks that had financed these investments began to suffer heavy losses. As the banks started to fail, trust in the financial system began to disappear. People rushed to withdraw their savings, fearing that their money would be lost. This led to widespread bank runs where institutions collapsed simply because they no longer had enough cash to meet withdrawals. The effects quickly spread beyond the banking system. Businesses could no longer access credit, factories reduced production, and workers were laid off. Unemployment rose sharply, reaching levels that had never been seen before. The crisis was no longer confined to financial markets, it had entered everyday life. As the banking system weakened, many people began to lose faith not just in banks but in money itself. Instead of keeping their savings in financial systems, instead of keeping their savings in financial institutions, they chose to convert it into gold and hold it privately. To them, gold represented security in a time of uncertainty. For the government, this created a serious challenge. Gold was not just a store of value, it was the foundation of the monetary system. If large amounts of gold were held outside the banking system, it limited government's ability to stabilize the economy and respond to the crisis. In 1933, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the United States government took an unusual and controversial step. Citizens were required to surrender most of their gold holdings to the state. This included gold coins and bullion that were being held as private savings. In return, people were given paper currency. The objective was to bring gold back under government control and restore stability to the financial system. Many citizens complied with the order, believing that it was necessary during a severe crisis. Others, however, chose a quietly hold on to their goal, reflecting the level of uncertainty and distrust that existed at the time. This moment really reveals the depth of the crisis. It was no longer limited to banks or markets, it had reached directly into the financial security of ordinary people. What began in the United States quickly spread across the world because global economies were interconnected. The collapse of the American finance affected international trade and investment. Countries reduced imports, industries slowed down, and global trade declined sharply. Germany was particularly vulnerable. Its economy recovery, its economic recovery during the 1920s had depended heavily on American loans. When those loans were withdrawn, the German economy began to collapse. Businesses failed, unemployment surged, and social conditions dete- deteriorated rapidly. The crisis soon turned into a political problem. As people lost jobs and economic stability, they also began to lose faith in democratic governments. Many felt that existing political systems were unable to provide solutions. In Germany, this environment played a crucial role in the rise of Adolf Hitler. Promising economic recovery, national strength, and stability, he was able to attract widespread support. Economic hardship was transformed into political change, and that political change would soon reshape Europe. At the same time, the global economic crisis weakened international cooperation. Countries increasingly turned inward, adopting protectionist policies and raising trade barriers. Instead of working together, nations focused on their own survival. By the early 1930s, the world had entered one of the most severe economic crises in modern history. Industrial production had fallen dramatically, global trade and had collapsed, and unemployment affected tens of millions of people. The Great Depression did not directly cause the Second World War, but it created the conditions that made conflict more likely. It weakened economies, destabilized governments, and undermined the fragile system that had been built after the First World War. What had begun as a financial crisis in 1929 had evolved into global transformation, and in doing so, it brought the world a one step closer to another major conflict, that was World War II. So that's our topic about the Great Depression. Thank you for tuning in with us. Have a great day.